Hello, and welcome to the Art of Intuition podcast. My name is Susan Jane, and I believe that trusting your intuition is the best way to live your life with meaning and purpose. Each week you will hear about how you can connect, develop, and trust your intuition through interviews with other guests and my own personal experiences. Join me to understand how your intuition can guide you towards a life full of meaning and loving purpose. Hello and welcome to the Art of Intuition podcast. I'm Susan Jane The Intuitist and I'm your host for the podcast. Now today we are talking about, actually it's a confession I have to make. I have to confess that I am a control freak. Now, I mean that in the nicest possible way. And one of the things that I am very, very wary of is that I do not try to control those that are outside of me. The only thing I really try to control is myself. And sometimes that gets a little bit out of control, especially after a glass of wine or two. But we're not really going that way. So today it's all about being in control and how to regain that control and how to understand it. Now, what has that got to do with your intuition? Well, when you start to listen to your intuition, you've become aware of it more so, and the messages that you're getting through, it helps you learn to control a lot better. It helps you accept and understand. So the first thing we can look at when we're looking at control is what you're trying to control, or if you really need to control things. Now, when you're looking at, say, a relationship between two people, now you can't control what the other person is doing, whether it's a child, a sibling, a parent, a partner, it doesn't matter. You cannot control the other person. And if you are trying to do that, then there's problems. And first of all, you need to look at yourself, because you cannot control another person. You may have ideas of how you want them to be, and you may have, if you're an adult and you're referring to a child, you may have a better understanding of life, but you cannot control them. The idea is we try to allow them to control themselves. And we can do this in a manner of monkey see, monkey do. If we can control ourselves, in times when problems are happening and situations are happening, we can control what we're doing and how we're responding and reacting to it, then maybe that child will learn the same way. Now, of course, a child will learn the opposite way as well. Like, for example, if there was areas in your life that you're doing that, okay, I'll give you an example. In my relationship, in my marriage, my 20-year marriage, I would often give away my power to my ex-husband. I would often appease him by just accepting what he was saying and going along with it. So it stopped us having arguments. It stopped us creating any drama. And I did that for the sake of my children. I didn't want my children to experience yelling and screaming in a relationship. I wanted them to see relationships as a happy married type couple. Now, of course, the reality was I was not happily married. I was being emotionally manipulated, often emotionally abused, and I was copying it. I was accepting it for the sake of keeping the peace. I felt I was controlling the relationship or the situation because of giving in all the time. To me, that was how I could control it. But the reality was I was giving away my power. I was giving away my control and constantly backing down. Now, what happened then, of course, is that's what my children saw me do. My children, my eldest daughter saw me behaving that way and mimicked that as she got older. Consequently, her relationship has not gone how she would like it. My son saw it. His first relationship, he didn't follow what I was doing. He followed what his father was doing. And his first relationship failed too because of that. And since then, both of them have learned. Lucky enough, my youngest daughter is going well in her relationship, but she has always been one to open up and ask for help, and she will not tolerate any nonsense in it. So she is more open to that. So she wasn't as swayed as the others were in their perception of how a relationship is. So in my attempt to control the situation, I actually created more problems. So what we need to do is, when we're looking at control, we have to look at what we can control and what we can't. So when you have a situation, you have a problem, you have to ask yourself, so what can I control and what can't I control? Now, everything you have not access to, but everything you're involved in your life, you have a certain amount of control for, but not everything. So, I mean, so everything you have a control, but you haven't got the full control over. So you've got to understand what part of it you can control and change and what part of it you can't. Now, the majority of times, the only part you can control, and this is the majority of times, is the you part of it. So in my relationship, with this 20-year relationship, the only thing I could really control, it was me. It was how I was reacting, how I was responding, how I felt about it, what it meant to me, and how it went like that. What I was constantly doing as an empath is feeling what he was going through and responding accordingly. Now, not necessarily according to what I needed to do. And it wasn't until I walked away from that relationship that I realised. So when we're looking at control, we cannot control everything. I do cryptocurrency. I love playing in the cryptocurrency world. Not good, no, but I only use money that I feel. I suppose you can get into crypto with very small amounts of money. So, you know, $20, $50, you can get into with very small amounts of money. So it was a really good way of me starting with the investment. So, but I have no control over what goes up and what goes down. All I have control over is how I feel about it at the moment, how I feel that the charts are looking like, or how I feel somebody is talking about something, my feelings towards it. That's all I have control over. And with things like cryptocurrency or anything like that, it is a really good understanding of how you're feeling. Because one thing about stuff like that is that you cannot blame other people for what you're doing. And in doing crypto, in doing shares, in doing anything like that, it is all about what you're doing. If you decide to put on $100,000 and you can't afford it onto a crypto and it gets washed out, or shares and they get washed out, the only person you can blame is you. And if somebody has given you that advice, you can still only blame you because you took that advice on board and you responded to it. So we've got to look at things like that. Even with a car accident, the police say, even if you were standing still and another car hit you, you are still 5% at fault. Now, the reason why you're 5% at fault is because you were in a car parked or on the road. So if you weren't there, then you wouldn't be at fault at all. So we all have a little situation there that there's an element of it that is our control and an element that isn't. So when we look at it again, we really need to focus on what we can control and what we can't. So when I'm doing crypto, I focus on the charts and what I can look at, and I'll go do a meditation. I'll get an understanding. What does it feel like? What does it look like? Look for signs, get an understanding of it. And of course, I don't put big money on it because I don't feel comfortable with that at this stage, and I don't feel confident with that at this stage. But the same is in a relationship. When you're in a relationship and you're having issues or problems with a relationship, you have to start looking at not blaming the other person, but understanding what your element, what your part of it is all about. Now, I look at my past relationship, and as I said before, I could blame him. He was a big drinker. I could blame him for drinking. He emotionally manipulated me. He used to, we lived a long way out of town. We lived about 45 minutes out of town. Oh, no, it was about an hour at those days. We lived about an hour out of town, and so there was no grocery shops where we lived in this beachside community. So we'd go to town, and I'd only go to town every 4 to 6 weeks, and I'd go and do a big shop. Now, I had 3 kids under the age of 3. So it was I didn't like going shopping very often because it was a big shop and I could then just stay home for 4 to 6 weeks. But he used to say to me, well, what do you need? And I'd have to write a list down of everything I needed. He would add it up in his head how much they cost and then hand me the money. So it was a lot of control financially, emotionally, physically. There was a lot of control over me. And I often felt like, I often felt trapped, often very much trapped. So when we look at that aspect of it, I look at, okay, in that situation, what could I control and what couldn't I? Because I could turn around and say he was manipulating and he was an alcoholic and he was this and he was that. But what's that achieving? Every time I blamed him for something or blamed somebody else for something, I gave my power away. Because you think about it, if I can turn around and say, well, it's his fault because he was drinking, then I have no control over it. I have nothing. It's all in his spot. He has complete control over it because I blamed him. Now, if I can blame myself and go, all right, what part of this is my fault? Or what part of this can I control? So I'd go, all right, I was being too docile. I was being too empathic. I needed to stand up and say my piece. I needed to learn how to be me, find the core of me and be who I was and be true to me. So I had to start going through all these areas in my life where what could I control and what couldn't I? So if he was coming home from the pub at night, I'd have the kids in bed, his dinner was there, and he would often come in and want to start an argument. He'd had a bad session at the pub, so I would usually cop it. And there was a time there when I used to, well, deliberately aggravate him because it was getting to me. So there was a part of that I could control. Now, one of these particular areas was when I read the book, The Dance of Anger, and I do apologise to the author, I can't remember his name, but it was all about how we manipulate each other and dance. So when you've got somebody like him that was the dominant person, he could manipulate me and dance. So what he would do was say, here's the problem. It was dust on the microwave. There's dust on the microwave. And he would just start going off. And okay, I'd clean up the dust. And he would then go, yeah, but that's not the only thing. And then he would go continuously on and on and on. So he'd go, but that's not the only thing. There's dishes in the sink. That's not the only thing. You haven't looked after the kids' problem. That's not the only thing. Your washing's not up to it. That's not the only thing. And he would just keep on going until he found a spot that would really upset me. And one of the things that would really get to me, and it was a button he used to press, one of them that used to get to me was that I was a bad mother. As soon as he played that card, as soon as he pressed that button, he had me, and then I'd have that instant response. I was out of control. And I don't mean physically out of control. I just mean out of my body control. It was like he had managed to wind things up so then he had the upper hand each time. And that's where I had to start to control me. So I had to not necessarily control him, because I can't, as I said, you can't control him. You can't control the other person. So I had to control me. So when we started this Dust on the Microwave, this particular one, and I'd read this book, Dance with Anger, he then would we started off, we had the fight about dust on the microwave, and then he sort of went, oh, and this, and he'd talk about the car or something, something completely different. And I'd go, no, you were upset about, as you walked in the door, you were upset about the dust on the microwave. The dust on the microwave is now gone. And remember, I had 3 kids under the 3 here. I was really struggling. The dust on the microwave has gone. There's no reason now to be upset. Oh, yes, there is, because of this. And he would go off again. Okay, I'd bring it back. But I get that that's not done. But you were upset about dust on the microwave. What we are arguing about now is dust on the microwave. And I just kept on bringing it back and that's what I had control over. I had control over whether I chose to go dancing with him in this dance of anger until he found a spot that he could fire away. I chose not to do that. And this is what I talk about when I talk about being in control and being a control freak. It's the control that you can have on yourself. And as you develop your intuition, as you start to connect with it, you start to get this feeling that it doesn't feel right. And you're getting information, you're getting understandings, you can start to follow that. You start to get strong in your core. You start to get an understanding of who you are, where you are, and what you want to do. That's when you have control. Because if something comes up and it doesn't suit you, and you don't know who you are, you're going to take it on board. If something comes up and you know who you are, you're going to have control over whether you say yes or no to it. So that is what control is all about, having control over your own self, over your own body, over your own thoughts, over your own actions and own responses. Now, again, you do not have control over anyone else. So when we're looking at relationships, say we're looking at a parent-child relationship, you don't have control over that child. There's things there that you might want to, and I'm probably talking about an older child, not a really young child, because a really young child you need to protect and look after. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a child that's getting to the age where they can make their own decisions and they understand the consequences of those decisions. And that's, like primary school, they're understanding the consequences of their decisions. So when you're looking at this control aspect with a parent and child, it's not about you wielding control over them. It is about you getting them to understand their own control. And as soon as they start blaming somebody else, what they're doing is giving away their power. And I have to say that over and over again. Every time you blame, you give away your power. Every time you blame someone or something or the government, every time you blame, you give away your power. Now, I'm not saying that everything is your fault, but what you can do is find the aspect in that you can control, that is, for want of another word, your fault. The element that you have it. Remember that 5%, if you're sitting in your car on that road and somebody hits you, you're still 5% at fault. Find that percentage that you're at fault, because that is what you can have control over. Now, one other aspect here, I'll give you an example. All right, so we had a few issues here with my partner's daughter. Okay, so we had a few issues here, and look, she was upset with something, and so she just stopped talking to us, And look, I get that. She's old enough to be able to do whatever she likes, and we can't control what she does and how she does it. What we can control is it's under our roof, and we can control that aspect of it. So, and we do have the option to say, if you're not happy, you need to go. If you're willing to do as we ask, you're more than welcome to stay. So these are the things we have control over. We can't control how she behaves, but we can control the environment where she is living, because she is living with us. And where you have to be really, really mindful of this is how much of it, again, is your fault. And although there wasn't so much as anything that was my fault, there was elements of it that I could do better. I could do something else. So she's walking around, stomping around, moving around the house for it was sort of 10 days at that stage, just stomping around and doing her thing, going to work, coming back, whatever. Now, in those 10 days, of course, I'm sitting there going, fuming a little bit too, because it was really, really uncomfortable. I said to my partner, she's making the place really toxic with this. This is really uncomfortable. I am so sensitive to other people's feelings that I'm really finding this uncomfortable and not nice to live with. But again, I didn't really, it wasn't up to him to do something. It's not up to him to do it. It's her choice. It was her choice. And he did speak to her. He did say, if you're not happy here, you know, you can't keep walking around like this. If you're not happy here, then you need to look at something else. But what I did was I decided to change my attitude. What could I control? I couldn't control what she was doing. What I could control was my attitude towards it. So I started to change my attitude. Now, one of the ways I used to do this, and this is how I first started, so you might find this quite helpful. What I used to first do was I would visualize white light coming down through through the main chakra at the top. I used to visualize white light coming down through the top of your head, and I would always bring it into my heart center, into the heart, and then I would send it out. Now, my attitude was, it's coming from direct source, so from upstairs, from direct source. It's going via my heart, so I have to make sure it's pure and of love. It's going via my heart and being sent out. Now, I know this is where we start getting a little bit woo-woo, but this is how I did it. This is how I learned to cope with what other people were doing and how I could control what I was doing. So I used to send this white light through. And I remember thinking, someone else sort of said, we'd had meditation. This was 20, 30 years ago, whatever. We'd had this meditation and the lady said to me, well, what colour is your light? And I said, oh, I've just used white. It's always been pure white light. And she goes, okay, well, that's fine. But it made me think, and I went, oh, what if I did a colour? You know, like I could do pink for love, or I could do green for healing. And I started to come up, you know, blue for communication, started to come up with these different colours. And then, of course, me being the person I am and overthinking everything, had to go with rainbows because I could not choose what colour. So I went with rainbows. So white light always came in and rainbows always went out. And what I would do was basically shoot people with rainbows from my heart. Now, I know this sounds a bit silly and it sounds a bit crazy, and sure, it is, and if that's where you want to go, that's fine. But what it actually made me do is start to think a little bit differently. I stopped looking at all the negatives and started shooting positives. And of course, if these positives are coming through me, it started to make me feel better. One of the things I had to do, and I really don't know why I did this, again, the intuition's kicking in, I don't have a choice, but I had to face the person and shoot from my heart. So if they were behind me, I had to sort of turn all the way around and, you know, fire out these rainbows from my heart. And it just gave me a different aspect of looking at something. So if somebody was standing there yelling and screaming, I'd be shooting rainbows and they'd be looking at them like, oh, this lady's on something, because I'd be just shooting rainbows. That's all good. And it just allowed me to have control over me. It didn't matter what anyone else was doing. Nobody knew what I was doing. Nobody realized that they were getting shot with rainbows from my heart. But it allowed me to have control over my thoughts and my feelings and my responses. And that's what I did with my partner's daughter. I started feeding her love, light, healing. I started putting out rainbows. And then the whole scenario changed. You know, there was a situation that happened. I had to send her a text and said, you know, this has happened. I've had to do this. So I'm out for a little bit, but, you know, this is happening and that's happening. I had to break the cycle. And I felt, because I've been doing this energy work, it felt right to do it. It felt nice to do it. And I then let it go. I didn't control it. If she wanted to respond to the text, so be it. If she doesn't, it didn't matter. I was doing what I knew was the right thing to do. And it went from there. By that evening, everything's back to normal. We're all chatting and it's all lovely. Wouldn't know there's a problem at all. So it's amazing how, and I haven't controlled her. She's done that herself. And yet in what I did, allowed her to be who she is, and it really did control the situation without force. This is what we need to look at. Become a control freak, but don't become a control freak for everyone else. Become a control freak for you, for who you are and what you're doing. Because when you do that, you start to listen to your intuition, you will really be in line with your true core values. You will really get a clear understanding. So I had another situation where this lady was really giving me a hard time. She was our next door neighbour, but lived quite a distance away. This is when we were on the organic crop farm. So I was on a night. We owned a 90-acre organic crop farm for, what was it, 9 years, something like that. And I loved being on the tractor, because that was my time. You know, I just would go and slash the paddock on my tractor, and no one could talk to me because I was just in my element, driving along. Loved it. But one of the neighbours we had a lot of issues with. She was, I don't know, it was just challenging. You know, one of those things that are just challenging. And she had her issues. I had mine. We all got our issues. But for so long, I sort of held it against her, and I just would, I'm not talking around. And, you run away and you hide, and I'm not really run away and hide, but if you saw them on the street, you just cross the road or whatever. And it just made it really uncomfortable. And that's when I really sort of went, no, I've got to do something different. I've got to change this scenario. I don't need to be this woman's friend, but I've got to change how I feel about it, because it's making me toxic, and I don't want to be toxic. I don't want to have that negative thoughts and uncomfortable feelings in me. And I've always determined to be very strong about that. So I did that technique with her as well. It was like, and I was never close to her. She was a long way away, but I would just send the rainbows or love or light, or just send positives to her. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you haven't got positives in you and you're bringing them through, they're going to be sitting there in with you as well. It's going to change your life. Anything like that is going to change your life, and that's what's really, really important, getting yourself back on track. So the main thing is, when you want to have control, remember what part of it you can control. So if you've got a situation there's some of it that's somebody else's problem, and then there's some of it that is your problem too. So in every single relationship, a relationship takes at least two people. In every single relationship, there's an element of that you have control over, and there's an element that you don't have control over. Focus on where you can control it. If you can't, if I know there was one particular situation, I can't remember what it was now, but there was a particular situation, and I remember distinctly thinking, all right, what part of this is my fault? What can I blame myself for? Because if I blame myself, I can fix it. I can sort it. I can deal with it. If I can't blame myself, then I can't deal with it. So it was, and I can't remember what the situation was, but I remember thinking, you know what? There's nothing in that I can do, I can blame myself for. I have to allow that person to deal with it their way. There's nothing else I can do. So once I realized that as well, so again, in a situation where I can't deal with it, I can't blame myself, I can't control it, can't do anything with it, I have to give it back. And when you give it back, let it go. Don't hold on to it. Don't be one of those people that just, I want to hold it. Let it go. Just say, that's yours. Sever those ties, get rid of it. It's really, really important. So we've got a situation. What part of it can you deal with? What part of it you can't deal with? With my ex-husband, I couldn't deal with his attitude, how he was treating me. That was his problem, not mine. But I could deal with how I was going to respond to it, what I was going to say, and how I was going to do it. I had control over me. Even during the attack, and I've talked to you about the attack when I was attacked, there was a lot of stuff there that I couldn't deal with because it was not my fault, or not I had no control over it. So I could just blame the whole lot on what they did. But the reality was there was parts of that that I could control, and I did. And I've talked to you about that and what has happened, what I did, what happened to me in that situation. And that was my control. That was where I could control what I did and how I responded to it. I couldn't control them attacking me. I couldn't control the rape. I couldn't control any of that. I had to let that go. But I could control how I was going to respond to it emotionally and mentally. And that's where I controlled it. So yes, I'm a control freak, but I'm only controlling me. And when I'm doing my life coaching and when I'm doing the business coaching and helping entrepreneurial women get their business together, get their lives together and get moving, when I'm doing all that, it's all part of me making sure that they are strong enough, confident enough to walk on their own in their own little area. So again, if I can't help them, I'm not going to blame them and say, well, she didn't do what I said, so it's her fault. It's like, no, I haven't shown her properly. I haven't taught her properly. I haven't guided her properly through that. She needs to have more. I am not a blamer. I will not blame. I refuse to blame. If I can take control of any of that, if I can blame myself in any way. So I did have one lady that I was coaching, and we had it just wasn't working out properly. And we talked about it quite a bit, but it still wasn't working out. I sort of felt that she was using my time unwisely, and I wasn't happy with that. So we did talk about it and everything else. But the reality was I looked at it and went, well, what part of this was my fault? Because she was blaming me. She was blaming me for doing this wrong and doing that wrong and all the rest. And I was getting a little bit, but it was true. What she was saying was true. There was a lot of, I was at fault. It was new to me. I was maybe doing it wrong by what her standards were or what her thoughts were, and I took that on board. But I also said to her, and what part of it can you do better? And she was sort of floored. She was happy to blame, but then she had no control. She gave me all her control, and I could sit there and go, all right, well, if you're going to blame me, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, I can do this and I can do that and I can do this. And you have no control. Stop blaming. Stop blaming. Find anything. Before you blame someone, find that little smidgen of what you could do that was different. We're just getting that place repainted, right? So the lounge room had to we had a hole in the ceiling, we had to get that done. We're just getting it repainted. Now, we didn't know the colours properly. We just didn't, because we want to go a bit brighter, but do you know what colours? And I don't know about you, but do you know how many whites there are? Oh my God, there are so many whites. And then there's the warm tones of whites, and there's the cool tones of whites, and there's this whites and that's white. So we were really stuck with the whites. And we said to the painter, well, you know, what do you think? What do you reckon? And he said this and that. And anyway, he did say that he was going to put some swatches up for us, and he was going to bring some colours for us and help us with it. Anyway, he didn't do that, and he did a real light spray across, and it was very, very grey. Now, we've got our house is more like a modern Balinese type, so it's got more of the browns and all the plants and things like that. Grey doesn't match it, doesn't suit it at all. It was a real cold, cool tone, and we've got a lot of warm tones and wooden floors, that aspect. So I could feel my partner getting a bit upset because it wasn't quite what he wanted, and he said I didn't want grey, and he got grey, and I said, yeah, but you said you wanted a brighter colour than that, and you wanted to take out the yellow. So, we went through it all, and I remember at the end going, you know what? The painter could have done better. The painter could have given us what he said he was going to do for us, and which was putting in the colours, because we're talking about a big house and a lot of paint. He could have helped us out with the colours a little bit more. But in the same token, we didn't help ourselves by not working it out properly. And on the weekend, what we ended up doing was buying all these sample pots, coming back and painting the walls in all different spots to get the right colour. Once we had done that, the painter came back in and he said, oh, actually, look at the colours against the kitchen. And then we sort of pulled back the plastic and there's the kitchen. And the colour that we had decided on after all that made the kitchen look dirty. The white of the kitchen looked dirty because the white of the kitchen wasn't real white. It was a cream, another different white. So he stepped forward and helped us because we stepped forward and helped us. And so we started working together. And in the end, I thanked him. I thanked him a lot. I mean, he's still painting, but I thanked him a lot. I said, thank you for your patience with us and getting that understanding. We didn't know where we were going. We had no way of doing that, but we took control and allowed him to then step up and go, oh, as a professional, I suggest you use this colour. So again, it's all about control. We then took control over what we were going to do because we needed the colour that was suitable and we couldn't just keep leaving it up to him. And then in us taking control, the whole situation changed. And then he said, oh, have a look at this then. We need to do it this way and that way and that way. We'll use that colour, but we'll half tint it, rah, rah, rah. So it's such a good learning curve. Everything we do, look at where we especially if you're blaming, no more blaming. No more blaming. From here forward, please do not blame anybody. If something happens, if you have a car accident, just sort of go, okay, I did have a car accident. What could I have done differently? Maybe not parked here. All right, no worries. But I really had to because there was a red light. Okay, fair enough. You just take away that blame area. And that person may have been driving too fast. That person may have been doing this. That person may have been doing that. That person may have been at fault. But the more you focus on that side of it, the more you're going down, the more negativity you're bringing with you. Don't do that. Keep it positive. Keep it uplifted. Keep it positive. Even in the hard times, there's always a positive side to it. Look for that silver lining. That's your job this weekend. This week, you've got to look for the silver lining. Next week, I want to talk about living an intuitive life, how we can do that a little bit better. But this week was all about control. Stop blaming, one thing. Look at what part of the aspect you can control and control that side of it. Stop trying to control other people. Control how you do it. Control how you look at things and how you do it. And if you want to know a bit more about what your intuition is trying to tell you about how you can control that, give yourself the time and the space to do it. Meditate. If you can't meditate, just sit there. When you go to bed, ask. Be careful of that though. I did that. Did that last night. Was up for about 2 hours during the night because I was getting all this information. But anyway, that's me. I've got to go because I have promised to make these shorter. I've been going too long. So that's me. I'm Susan Jane The Intuitist. You can see me on Facebook and Twitter and all those sort of things. The Art of Intuition website is starting to come together, but we're still at intuitivenature.com.au. But the artofintuition.com.au is coming together, and there'll be a lot more stuff coming on. So I want to say bye for now. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day, and I will catch you next week. Bye for now.